Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this amazing session. So we have Vinod and we have Rahul with us. So Vinod is the founder and partner of Kusla Ventures. Again, Kusla Ventures is one of the most iconic venture fund uh, in in the world. They invest in future tech and more impact tech. And Kusla's been investing in venture in the venture world for nearly 4 decades. It's like a legacy. Like I don't know how many people have nearly 4 decades of experience. But before with Kleiner Perkins, and again before that he was the founder of Sun Microsoft. Before that another startup. So who's been a founder, then came into the venture world as a wide amount of experience. Again, even in the venture world, like how he sees things, how he's been backing things is very, very different. Even at Kleiner Perkins, he backed Next Gen and a few other companies where he incubated, played a very, very active role in shaping. Just to give context, Next Gen is like one of the companies build a proper competitor chipset to Intel at the time. I think Next Gen was acquired by AMD, which become like a proper first competitor to Intel. So there's a lot of companies Vinod invested, and the story can go on and on. I can go on, but for now I'll pass here, and then I'm gonna give a very quick intro about Rahul. So Rahul is the founder and managing partner of Stellaris Venture Partners. So through Stellaris, they've been investing. It's one of the largest homegrown VC funds in India. Again, a multi-stage sector agnostic fund through which they backed some amazing companies, Wattfix, few other companies, Mama Earth, and other stuff. Before Stellaris, he was a partner at Helion Venture, which was one of the legacy VC funds which started like the few funds which started and then started Stellaris and grown it to one of the larger domestic funds today. So that's about Rahul. I'm gonna give it to Rahul and Vinod to lead this conversation. Thank you, Rahul, and thank you, Vinod, for joining. So over to you, Rahul.
Thank you, Vinod, for joining us. It's a pleasure talking to you. Always been a dream. So nice to talk to you in person as well. Maybe, Vinod, we
Great
have
to
very
be
limited
talking to
time.
everybody. Yes.
Yeah. And given that we have limited time, I'll directly start shooting questions, and hopefully we'll have some time left for audience to also ask questions. Vinod, maybe we'll start with a maybe slightly more controversial statement. Over the last 2 weeks, I've been trying to listen to a lot of your recent podcasts and articles and so on. You famously stated, in terms of, when we talk about venture assistance, that 90% of VCs don't bring value to startups and 70% actually bring negative value, so they harm them. I would love to know your view as to why you say that and what has been the experience. So hopefully some of the investors out here can learn also.
Well, the most common thing is investors often apply uh, common sense business experience to situations when every startup situation is unique. I'll give you a couple of examples. Who to hire? If you hire somebody who's done 15 years of marketing at IBM, they're completely unqualified to be a marketing person in a startup. In IBM, you do next year, you do what you did last year. In a startup, you have to reinvent marketing. You don't have the resources, you don't have a brand, it's not a continuing marketing job, it's the reinvention of how you approach the market. That's one example. I was just explaining to somebody there's a medical transcription market. We had an investment in that area. In fact, I invested in it with the idea that they would invest heavily in technology. So they would have an advantage. There were existing VCs on the road after we invested, convinced them not to invest in technology just to go for revenue. And of course, 3 years later, they ended up with a lot of revenue with negative gross margin, while some competitors had a, a technology advantage and some lower cost structure. They went out of business for lack of not revenue. They had lots of revenue and no margins. Those are just two examples. I see these over and over again.
Very interesting. And there are multiple ways in which VCs build an operating team? There is an A16Z model, and then there is an extreme, which is maybe a benchmark where there may be no operating team members. You have, my understanding is you have something in between.
Mhm.
How has that evolved? I'm sure 20 years back when you started, it was a very different model.
Yeah.
Now the requirements are different. So do you mind just sharing the model itself?
Yeah, our model has always been the same. We were the first ones to start it before anybody else did. But Benchmark doesn't hire operating partners to help their companies at all.
Mhm.
And it's a fine model because they don't do a lot of investments. And so if you have a small number of investments, partners can help them. And Recent, on the other hand, hires lots of them. Our approach is to hire people in our operating team that the startup itself couldn't hire.
Mm.
If a design person is too expensive, if a CFO is too expensive, if a sales and marketing person is too expensive for a startup, if they're making $1 million a year, a startup is not going to be able to hire them. So our view is a small but much uh, higher level of operating team is the right team, and they can advise entrepreneurs from a position of a lot of experience and strength and quality with expertise that startups couldn't hire themselves because it's too expensive. Hiring junior people to help them with marketing is not very valuable in general, I think. The startups should be doing it themselves.
And
So
in
that's the
India,
difference. There's a wide range of differences.
interesting. In India, also building operating team, and at least I'm seeing some of them pull back, except in areas like recruitment or finance. Are there certain functional areas where you've seen operating team adding value versus certain areas where you would rather not have an outsider or suggest the founders to hire from inside or have an in-house person itself?
Yeah. Look, there's the private equity model, which is a very different kind of operating team. They're really meant to run the business for entrepreneurs, and I think in the startup world, that's a bad idea.
Mhm.
In the PE world, that works. I've never considered myself as being in the PE world, and our focus is almost entirely on the early stage startup. So, recruiting is, of course, a fairly common one, and every startup needs it, and they don't need high-level recruiters 100% of the time. They need one key executive hire or two, and they get that done,
Yeah.
and then they don't need the help anymore. So that's an obvious one to put in a venture firm to help the companies. But in almost all areas, a startup is not going to be able to hire a super charged design person, for example, or may not be able to afford a growth person, a growth marketing person that you could afford. In a operating partner at a VC firm can then train a junior person at a startup on how to do growth marketing, and they should be on their own within a year or two. So I think most functions, a high-level operating person can help a startup.
And do you, let's say you invested in a, it's a fusion company and a Mach 5 speed, airplane company. Now, the growth or whatever function we take, are they applicable in different kind of sectors, or do you then within your teams also differentiate these are better suited for that particular industry or not?
No, not every company needs every function. Fusion is not, one that needs any outward-looking function. It needs recruiting and building great teams to manage highly complex projects, or Mach 5 aircraft, which we're doing in a company called Hermes, are very, very different kind of skill sets and very long-term investments. They take 10 years to get to product, or sometimes longer than 10 years. So each company is different. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. And are there situations where you found founders resisting this model or this assistance? And if yes, what, like, are there some patterns to be drawn from there?
So we haven't found that, but because we don't force a founder to use our growth marketing person. If they don't want it, we don't have to, there's always so many companies in our portfolio that are looking for help that we almost never have somebody help a company if they don't want the help. So our view is founders determine what help they need. Again, the PE firms have a model that they will put somebody in and they will tell the founders what to do. We don't ever do that. Our view is that they're just to help when the founder needs help or asks for help.
And
Mostly, we
over
find
years,
people want a lot more help than
fair point.
we can't give full marketing people to every firm in our portfolio. So usually the requests for help far exceed what we provide.
And do these guys, the people who join as operators or operating partners, do they have a career path? And then what do they do after 3 years, 4 years in the firm?
So our operating partners are there for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually very experienced people who have experience in startups. They've done a startup and then join us mostly because they enjoy advising entrepreneurs. So it's like a mentor to an entrepreneur or an advisor to an entrepreneur is the role they play. And they're quite happy doing this for 10, 15 years. We've had operating partners who've been there for well over 10 years.
That's interesting. Mm. And how, like, a lot of time I've also seen that people who just came fresh from having built a business, as an investor, they basically are very eager to get things done the way they think it should be done. How do you avoid that, that pushing down somebody's, your own idea, somebody's throat versus being consultative? Is there a lot
So
of
we
training that these
never
people
do
go through?
that. In fact, we are not even consultative, we are just advisory.
Hmm.
My view, if somebody doesn't want help, they should do it on their own. And that's just fine. Because in the end, they have to take responsibility for building their business. And if you start telling them what to do, then they don't take responsibility. And if something goes wrong, they'll blame you. So you have to let them do their thing, including making mistakes. So most of the relationships are you advise them and they do what they want, either what you suggest or often what you don't. And that's fine. We tolerate that, and we don't want any company to be what we think is optimal, because usually the founder knows a lot more about the situation than we do. They're spending 80 hours a week on their company, and investors come in once every week or once every 6 weeks. You don't know the company as well and their situation as well. So we are much more focused on being there to advise entrepreneurs, not to tell them what to do.
Mm. And moving on, Vinod, from the operating model of Khosla Ventures to, at least I would love to spend some time talking about the predictions. I was reading through the
Mhm.
12 recent predictions you made, I think, few years back, and then you're spending multiple years investing behind those. The first question, and for people who have not read, there is enough material available online to go through those. So I'll not walk through all 12, but I'm very curious to know what kind of effort do you put in arriving? Is there a lot of reading? Is there a lot of talking to people? Is it just thinking on your own? Like, what do you do to get to, what will happen 10 years from now, or what is likely to happen 10 years from now?
It's really a lot of advising. Talking to most people doesn't help because they'll tell you what everybody else is saying. If everybody believes something, it's not a surprising prediction. So my focus is what can technologically be done, what's possible, and then is there a path to adoption in society or in a particular environment? So both, it has to be technically possible and a social path to acceptance of these new ideas. So that's, but I come up with my own almost entirely by reading a lot and then putting pieces together and thinking through um, what might happen, how it might happen. And as you might guess, predictions can often be wrong, but I tend to take the view that these are things that we can help make happen by investing in the right entrepreneurs. We have a public transit startup. Everybody thought it was crazy to do public transit or Fusion, or frankly, everybody thought it was crazy to invest in OpenAI. But our public transit startup has never been invited to bid, but it has won every bid it has entered. It's not lost a bid yet, which is pretty ridiculous if you think about a startup bidding in public transit, where they're never invited because they're a startup and nobody invites startups in large bids for public transit systems. But we win every time so far. And so you have to think from first principles, what can you offer that's so compelling in any area, whether it's Mark 5 aircraft or Fusion or simple enterprise SaaS application. Obviously, we're doing a lot in enterprise SaaS. We're doing a lot in fintech. We are doing a lot in biotechnology and healthcare in general. So we cover all areas that are deeply technical. We tend to be optimistic about assuming we can make large inventions. I'll give you a simple fact. I've worked with 3 people where after we started working with them, they won the Nobel Prize.
Wow.
That's the caliber of people I like to work with. And one, you learn a lot. So it's a lot of fun working with these people. But also, they do the more radical things, which I like to do. And these are usually technical breakthroughs. And based on that technology breakthrough, you build large businesses.
And how much, like when you make a future prediction, at least as an investor, sometimes you're thinking, is there enough to do in that area or not? As in, is there enough deal flow? Will founders build? How related are your predictions to whether there is deal flow? Will somebody even build in that area or not?
They're not. There's no deal flow in public transit. We create the idea because it's possible to do. And so our focus, look, really interesting people are always calling me. That's my schedule is always jammed, and I'll always meet them because I can learn from them a lot. And so I meet with a lot of people just because I'll learn something, not because it's an investment, or I don't call any investment a deal. That's a transactional phrase where you buy and sell. To me, startups are about some entrepreneur's dream. And that's why we work with startups that have very strong mission oriented. We want to make this thing happen. I believe it's possible and I'll make it happen kind of mission driven entrepreneurs, mostly what we do. And if something doesn't exist, we'll create it.
Very interesting. And reverse can also happen, that because you made a prediction, now you find a founder who's building that idea. How do you avoid, doing or investing in that company just because of love for the thesis, not, or have you faced that challenge that, you would have invested in a founder which may not meet the bar, just because it fell into your thesis area?
Yeah. It sometimes happens by accident. We misjudge a founder, but just because we have a thesis doesn't mean we'll make an investment there. It's because the right founder comes along, very often because we made a prediction or talked about a future, And some entrepreneur will say, I'm doing that, I'll call Khosla Ventures. And so it does attract the right kinds of founders when you have these mission-driven conversations or talks. So we get a lot of inbound. So we are probably one of the few VCs that has never had a sourcing function. We have nobody who sources investments. In the last 20 years, we've never had a person. They all come to us almost completely, which is a huge advantage, but it's because they believe our approach.
And I know you're an optimist as an investor, you have to be. But let's say you're thinking about AI, and we'll go into AI. As you were thinking about those positive predictions, how do you avoid saying, something negative can also happen and is likely to happen as per my thinking?
Oh, we do that all the time. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I wrote a 25-page document on AI, whether it will lead to dystopia or utopia. The dystopia is all the negative things. I addressed all those in this document. In fact, half the document is about negative things that can happen with an AI. So, look, my style is to lay everything out and then try and make the right things happen. So very much in, by the way, we don't keep a lot of these insights secret. We lay them out. If other VCs want to pick them up and do the same thing, fine. But usually the founders will call us because we originated a thesis.
Interesting. And, again, in those 12 predictions, there are few on the healthcare, one on healthcare, one on education side. Just curious to know, at least we are struggling with not enough people building on the cusp of AI and consumer first businesses. Is there a view you have that most of the folks are building more enterprise and AI or enterprise focused AI businesses versus consumer focus? Is there because the technology is not yet there, or is it just focus is not there? And why is that not happening?
First, I would disagree with that assertion. We have a company, Intech, which in 3 or 4 years has gone up to a pretty large company, and they are all about using AI to do book publishing.
Got it.
So where do they use AI? To judge which books will do well. They suggest to the authors how to write with AI. Get almost like a senior author would be giving hints to each writer. They also know if somebody's reading a fiction book at 10 o'clock and they go to bed, that the book isn't so compelling. But if they're still reading it at 5 a.m., then you know that the book is very compelling. So they know what a compelling plot is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. And you've been brought up in India. If you think of India, on the enterprise pure software side, a lot of businesses got built over the last decade. With the wave of AI into software, where do you see structurally India being at an advantage for building global businesses and at a disadvantage over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think businesses will be built or not built based on the talent a country has. We have a lot of software talent, but it's really not the talent in software that'll matter. In 2 years, 80% of all coding or 90% will be done by an AI. So why do you need software engineers? But those same people are bright people who will start companies and come up with new strategies to start a company. And so it's smart people who can connect lots of different ideas, find the holes in the marketplace, and move across and do things. There's a lot of activity in healthcare in India, for example, mostly done by people who weren't healthcare people. Loop Health, Even Health are two companies we have, one on the insurance side, one in the care delivery side. There's a lot of enterprise companies in India. One I like a lot is a company called Zetworks, which has grown extremely rapidly. We've invested in that. But the thesis there is very simple. The world will move out of China. So China plus one is the whole strategy there. If the world needs manufacturing outside of China, then there's a business to be built there. So it's bright people and they will have that advantage. I think startups is a cultural thing. And so if you have startup culture, and India does, especially in certain regions, then they'll do fine. I always say Silicon Valley is not really a place, it's more a culture. It's an attitude of how you approach things, how much you're willing to challenge the status quo, do something new or different. And that's what startup world is about.
And as you know, with AI, there is a lot of, at least in US, there have been discussions around government getting involved, regulations coming in. As you think of AI, how do you factor those externalities into account, or do you not care about it and just stay focused on building the business?
Oh, I do care about it. First, government should get involved in certain things. AI will affect all of society. It'll affect jobs. It'll affect privacy. It'll affect GDP growth. When you have that, it is important that government have some regulations. If you're developing new drugs with AI, well, the government has to be involved. Some areas there's already regulation, others there isn't. So you try and shape policy. So I spend sufficient time in Washington, D.C. or in California participating in discussions around what the right policy is. That just becomes part of my job.
Interesting. Maybe I'll take a pause. I have a few more questions, but maybe Pavitran, if you want, we can have audience chip in with some of the questions of Vinod. I'm sure there are lots of them there as well.
Yeah, definitely we'll do that. So everyone, feel free to post your question in the question Q&A or in the chat, or raise your hand so we can hand over the mic. So we'll take one question at a time. So please feel free to post.
I think there are a few in the chat group. Pavitran, do you want to go?
Yeah,
Should I go over them, or you want to go do that?
I'm just gonna show them on stage. So we have
Okay.
these. So Vinod, the question is to you. What's your
I can see the question. Yeah. There are clearly space opportunities, in India. So there's been a pretty amazing space effort and very cost-effective space effort. We were very early investors in Rocket Lab 11, 12 years ago. And it's a public company now doing very well. Well, my view is there's room for lots more launches. I think it's almost a sad thing that there's only one Starlink in the world. There should be competing Starlink efforts. And I suspect in 10 years, there'll be 3 of them or 4 of them. So I do think there's real opportunity both to build satellites and to build launches. Those are different things. Transport to space is a different business than the actual business of satellites in space. I think there's opportunity in both. I'm a huge fan of mining data being collected by satellites and then AI to process it to discover a lot more resources like copper or steel or others. So we have a number of efforts in mining because the world needs many more minerals and metals. So yes.
So Vinod, one more question to you. Uh,
Whether somebody chooses to stay in India or not is a personal choice. It's a family choice. It's a ambition choice. Clearly, in an ecosystem like Silicon Valley, you learn a lot more. And you learn a lot faster because there's a lot more going on. Probably most importantly, what goes on in Silicon Valley is much more diverse. And so if you want to learn about fusion, it's not going to happen in India. If you want to learn about aircraft design in startups or other ambitious efforts, there's some AI in India, but state-of-the-art training large multi-trillion parameter models, which are going to be very common next year, is not something you learn in India. So I think a person should make the choice on what's important to them and follow their heart on how they want to trade off the various things. There's advantages to moving to Silicon Valley, there's disadvantages. You don't get any Golgappa quite the same way.
Yeah. Moving to the next one. So how do you balance between supporting moonshot ideas and mission-driven investing with seeing a planned fund returns with exit for 7 to 10 years in timeline?
That's a hard question. That's a very hard trade-off. Not everybody can afford to invest in moonshots. I invested in OpenAI and Commonwealth Fusion in the public transit system Glideways at the same time. Now, Fusion was very long-term, probably 12, 15 years to first product. And there was no guarantee, nobody was investing in Fusion. So the hope was we can create enough interest and hype to have people invest. But a big danger was there would be no follow-on investments, and it takes billions of dollars. But I thought it was too important to not try because no government was going to do fusion rapidly and fast. OpenAI was very different. I think there was no idea if we'd ever have AI really be useful, whether we'd have the kinds of technical breakthroughs we've had, and whether scaling laws would even happen. Nobody talked about scaling laws back then. And so it was a technological bet on will a breakthrough in technology happen? That's a very different kind of a public transit. I didn't think there was any technical risk. All of the risk was, would anybody take a startup in public transit seriously? So different kinds of risks, but I think as a fund for a small percentage of our fund's investments, 10, 20%, it's possible for us to do it because we get a lot of leeway from our LPs. They never tell us what to do and not to do. In fact, the funny story is the previous largest initial investment I'd ever made in any company in 40 years was 25 million. In OpenAI, I invested 40 when it was a nonprofit infrastructure, a nonprofit company with no product plan, none, and no revenue plan, not even a plan to have revenue. But a belief that if AI happened, it would be so large, profits would take care of themselves. That I sent an apology letter to LPs saying, we're doing this really ridiculous investment. It's very large, but we're not going to ask for permission. We're doing it anyway. We're just informing you. We know it's ridiculous. Like literally the only time in 40 years I've sent a letter to LPs because it was so unusual. But we made it anyway, and we didn't ask for permission. We have that leeway. Not everybody, younger funds don't have that leeway. So I recognize different funds are in different positions to do various things. Look, these long-term bets aren't for everybody, but people who have a reputation can afford to lose or even have a losing fund once in a while because they have enough of a track record can make those bets, but they're not financial bets. You can't calculate an IRR in that. In fact, one of the things we prohibit anybody from doing on any investment, we don't calculate IRR. I haven't seen one IRR number in the last 10 years when making an investment. At the fund level, we have to have that. But at the investment level, we never have an IRR.
Okay, one more question. Would AI push VC and PE investments?
Oh, AI will push all of them and innovate in all of them. But the kinds of investments available in VC are very, very different than the kinds of investments in PE. So very large difference. Now, will it change the nature? I don't like PE. I've never done it. I wouldn't know how to do it. But the kinds of investments PE firms should make are very different with AI than without AI.
Okay. So moving on to the next one. Oh, you invested in OpenAI. What's your thought on decentralized, especially Sam Altman co-founded WorldCoin?
You know, I'm a fan of distributed when it's needed. In identity, in most countries, distributed is a really good thing. Today, you have your Facebook ID and they control it and they decide what to do with it. You can't even iMessage Apple's customers without their permission. So centralized ID is not necessarily good for society. Now, Aadhaar built in India is based on centralized, but even that would be bad if somebody was a despotic regime. Certain parts of the world, like China, it'd be, I think, socially bad to have that kind of control. Distributed when it works and can be made to work is always healthier. So, big fan of that.
Sure. One more question here. Right. So there is this question: what are your views on the opportunities and challenges in backing hardware-focused startups, particularly in sectors like energy storage, medical devices, space tech, and emerging from India?
You know what? First, I don't know what the biggest thing when you're investing in an area is follow-on investment is available, or you craft some really clever strategies to not need lots of money, which is always good. So even here, you know, when you say you're doing a Mach 5 startup, these are aircraft that go at 4,000 miles an hour. No, it's very hard to get follow-on funding because most VCs won't support that. So we built a strategy. We're building Mach 5 steerable aircraft for the Air Force. They will issue contracts, and they're used to issuing contracts, and not many people doing this. So that capability, even in the US, is very unique. As far as I know, nobody else is doing Mach 5. Of course, in defense, Mach 5 really matters. You have to outchase missiles, which are also hypersonic. So in every area, you come up with clever strategies. Let's take the example of fusion. You know, it's possible no follow-on funding would come for fusion. First, we collected enough money in the first round, about $75 million, to get to reasonable milestones with it. But literally, the explicit strategy we had was, if we can't get follow-on funding, there's The first thing we had built was a 20 Tesla magnet, which nobody in the world had ever built. And we said, well, that will have uses in nuclear medicine. So there are applications for strong magnets that aren't fusion. And so we had a strategy like an off-ramp. Either if no funding was available or fusion never worked. Both when we were building Mark V aircraft and fusion. So you always have to be clever about this. And in all these areas, when possible, you want to try and have an alternate strategy if the principal strategy can't be funded because the venture world isn't investing in them.
Right. Got it. One more question. What has been the most significant lesson you learned in your career?
Well, there's no substitute for really great people. I don't believe you can ever not afford a really great talent. Whether you're a venture firm and getting those people on your side, or you're a startup, no question it's the single most important thing, is the right people.
Okay. Another one. While analyzing a business, how much weightage do you give to the market of the product as against the technology used, the team building of the product? See, example, a company is building for India market versus for the US.
So people is always the most important thing. After people, you want to be in the right market for the ambition you have to build. If you pick the wrong market, you can only be as large as the market. And so markets are important, but I have to be cautious. If you have a large market and everybody else knows it, then you're not going to have a huge advantage. You're going to have a lot of competition, and then capital efficiency of the startup is going to be low. Lots of people will do it and lots of competition. So you spend a lot more money on sales and marketing, which is usually wasted money. If you have a large technology breakthrough, I love large technology breakthroughs and say, how can they impact really large markets, right? Or how can you steer them to create a new market? So the last thing I would say is there's a massive difference between a market that exists and a market that's created. There was no market for social media. It was created. So when there's technology breakthroughs, lots of markets can be created. And so the best kinds of things, from my point of view, is a technology breakthrough that allowed you to create a new market that didn't exist. I was just telling somebody yesterday, when I first ran into Twitter, I was in Davos. I don't go to Davos anymore. But some writer came up to me and said, I'm writing a piece on this. Can I interview you? I said, sure. Then he pulls out his phone and says, can I use Twitter to ask my audience for questions? This was 2006 or 2007. And I said, interesting, but where's the market for Twitter? So you can be very short-sighted about how markets evolve. The best markets iterate and evolve. And there's a lot of new markets that are going to happen with AI. AI will be applied to old style businesses. AI will create new opportunities. We just invested in AI accountant. Obviously, we've invested in Devin as an AI software engineer. We've invested in AI structural engineer. We've invested in AI mental health therapist or a primary care physician. All these investments we've actually made. But there will be completely new things possible that weren't possible before AI, like mixing music, allow everybody to mix music with the help of AI, and it always sounds good.
Yeah.
So we have an AI in music startup. We have an AI in publishing startup. You were asking me about media before. We have an AI in building a new game platform that's based on AI, not a traditional gaming platform. So, innovation is possible everywhere. AI in the mining. AI in mining is going to be a huge deal. So you have to think broadly and not limit yourself to everybody is doing X, so I should do X.
Interesting. Very interesting. One more question on AI. With the news around Ryan and potentially diminishing returns, plateauing of performance on newer foundation models, where do you see the focus moving for companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, vertically focused models?
My view is very simple. Reporters have to write, they have to fill a certain number of column inches of text every day. So they're tasked with writing 5,000 words on X or Y. And so they write. I don't believe any of this. How's a reporter going to know if there's going to be another technical breakthrough? How's the reporter going to know? A year ago, they were saying the same thing. And suddenly, RLHF is this new thing that's completely changing the picture in AI. Used to be all transform models, and scaling still seems to be working in some areas. But for example, even a year ago, if you said, what data do you need? You need a company like Scale AI to collect lots of human data from lots of places. Today, that data is not as useful. So most of the data collection is with experts. 1,000 people in physics, 1,000 people in chemistry. So data sourcing is very different. The quality of the data is very different. All that changes what RLHF produces. Why did O1, the reasoning model, come through? Because of a completely different approach to AI and data. That's also going to happen in agentic systems. Nobody's collected data for every browser click, but computers certainly a year from now will be running a lot of software. You won't be running SAP or Oracle. Computers will be running SAP and Oracle. You'll be talking to the computer. We've made radical bets that are so different than the current AI paradigm. Because I'm always asking what's going to be important or possibly could be important in 4 or 5 years, because you can't predict invention. So we have a company called Symbolica that's using an esoteric area of math called category theory. If it works, it'll make thousands of times more efficient AI, maybe hundreds of thousands of times more efficient AI. All this discussion about power consumption in the world will go away. The discussion around hallucination will go away. The discussion around how many chips you need will go away. So, and I can't tell you this will work, but I'm pretty excited about Symbolica. It doesn't use transformers, doesn't use any of the traditional techniques. It uses mathematical techniques to have full explainability, computational efficiency, and in much more logical reasoning capability. So I think it's too early to say we are done. ChatGPT moment was only 2 years ago. It's not even 2 years ago. The 2-year anniversary is coming up. People forget. I saw this. So large breakthroughs are possible. I saw this model from Israel by a company called Descartes just a few days ago. Real-time video generation. So you could create a real-time wolf. And so I wouldn't have to be on Zoom. It would mirror me on Zoom. You can talk to my avatar I could be in Switzerland for all I care. So I think what is possible is limited by our imagination. I don't let constrain my imagination. But it takes a lot of courage. When we invest in the category theory startup, there wasn't one person who could even advise me on doing diligence. So we had to do our own diligence. In that, so you have to break these long bets. We call them long bets. We've not done anything in quantum computing except one startup that is so radical. It's doing quantum computing at room temperature in macro computers. You can 3D print this computer, and their plan is to put it on a drone next year and be a quantum computer that can do probabilistic computing. They're all ridiculous bets at some level. We have a startup that's doing an artificial womb. So if a woman having a premature baby, that can, especially in the US, become very expensive and very bad for the baby and the mother. So we are creating an artificial womb you can put a baby into for the last 12, 14, 16 weeks of the baby's life and have them grow up healthier. Now, these are all ridiculous bets, and frankly, that's why I like to work 80 hours a week, because they're all so interesting. I'll always learn about them. It's like reading science fiction to me every single day.
Interesting, very interesting. So,
and by the way, we're still doing enterprise SaaS. I said we just did an AI accountant. We won't need CPA firms if we are right. We're doing a lot of things. In fact, enterprise AI is one of the biggest areas of investment for us. And there's a fair amount of consumer AI too.
Interesting. Just an incremental question, like you were telling, right? When you take these long-term bets, how do you do these diligence, right? Maybe if you have to little bit roll back when you invested in OpenAI, how did you even? I mean, you mentioned there is nothing to do diligence, but there's something like would be looked into, right? What was the?
Well, we're a very technical firm, so we have a lot of technical capability in-house, and because we've made so many investments. If somebody is doing a new kind of material, I called somebody from a Mark 5 aircraft company and say, materials design, help us out in this new area, right? So we have a network that's very, very strong, but most of the early judgment we do in-house. We have we have more PhDs than most venture firms. We have a very accomplished technical team, so we can go quite deep, whether it's software architecture or database architecture or AI algorithms. Most of those we can do in-house. Once in a while, we'll call in outside expertise. That's a large advantage for us.
Interesting. One more question, right? Like, how do you spend your time in a day, right? Like, between, investments, sourcing new investments, or looking into talking with these new companies and supporting your portfolio companies and, running some firm operations. Because there's a lot of time.
So probably most of my time, if I looked at the single largest slice, probably 25, 30% of my time is spent recruiting for our companies. Recruiting executives, recruiting engineers. So that's probably the biggest chunk of my time. The second largest chunk of my time is actually meeting with the portfolio CEOs and looking at business strategy. I never look at financials. It's a waste of my time to look at it because other people do it better than I do it. So I almost never look at financials. I look at their technology development, their market strategy, their product definitions, things like that, but a lot of time on strategy. The third is looking at new companies in new investments coming through the door.
Got it.
And then there's administrative and other things, but those are the three biggest chunks of my day. the other biggest chunk of my weekend is reading. I'll easily go through hundreds of pages in new scientific I still read scientific papers. Most weekends I'm going through lots and lots of them, either just regular reporting about technology or a new paper came out in AI and I want to read it.
Got it.
It's very atypical of what other VCs do.
One final question, Vinod, here, right? Like from the audience. Yeah. What is one thing a new fund manager or a VC firm should do that compounds massively over next 10, 20 years?
The biggest thing you can do and the hardest thing is to build a team. And a very specific kind of team where every person learns from every other person. Most people build teams of like-minded people. There's none of the 5 MDs in our firm, there's 5, are anything like each other. So that diversity, different people look at every investment in different ways. And so we learn from each other a lot. And if you put the right team together, you learn. And then make lots of small fun bets as opposed to a few large bets. Investments are always surprising. So if you're a new VC firm, you don't want to bet your future on one large bet or 2 large bets. You want to make lots of small bets. One, you will learn a lot and learn about many different areas. And with a diverse team, you learn different points of view on each of these areas. So that'd be my advice to a firm starting out. I think that helps a lot.
Got it. Rahul, any question you want to wind this up?
No, this is amazing, Vinod. Thanks. I think we have overshot the time that you had allotted.
Yes.
But this is amazing and lots
I
of
have to
insight.
run to my next meeting. So
Yeah, sure. Take care.
Perfect.
great.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us, Rahul, and thank you for joining us, Vinod. See you next time. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Mhm.